This invention was unique and terrifying. Not AIDS, not the Black Plague. This was a disease that terrified many families in the 20th century.
This is polio, and it is something for you to remember. Polio is not over. Polio is not over for this patient. Polio is not over for thousands. Polio is not over for you.
Because this disease targeted mostly children. We are talking about polio. Polio killed many children back in the day. It was a disease that spread so quickly that an entire neighborhood could be affected by it in days. Those who survived were left paralyzed, some so much that they couldn't even breathe on their own. For them, they had only one option: give up and die, or live the rest of your life in a chamber, a machine called the iron lung. Hello everyone, today on Behind the Date, we will delve deep into one of the most unique medical inventions of the 20th century, an invention that mimicked the workings of a lung. This invention is mostly recognizable nowadays due to the interview of Paul Alexander.
I cannot move, period. For a lot of humanity knows nothing about polio. Even know what it is.
A polio survivor who had lived with an iron lung since the 1950s. Since he was a child, against all the chances, he not only lived but also went to college and became a lawyer, all while being trapped inside this massive machine. But why and how did Alexander employ the iron lung? What is the history of polio, and why is iron lung regarded as such an important invention? Let's look into all these questions in this video. Polio is a highly contagious viral illness that has caused great agony and death throughout history. It is caused by the polio virus, which is spread mostly through person-to-person contact, as well as contact with infected surfaces, food and water. This disease has a long history, dating back to the 5th century BC, when Hippocrates first described it. Polio outbreaks were initially reported in Europe in the 1700s, and by the late 1800s, the disease had spread to the Americas. Polio epidemics were widespread in the United States in the early 1900s, with thousands of cases documented each year. With the rise of globalization in the 1950s, polio became recognized as a severe public health hazard. Many people were terrified since many of the victims were youngsters. Hundreds of experts from all over the world tried to find a vaccination for this condition, but it was Jonas Salk, an American medical researcher, who discovered the treatment. This vaccine, made accessible to the public in 1955, was crucial in reducing the prevalence of polio in the United States and other countries. Albert Sabin, another medical researcher, discovered an oral vaccine for the disease in 1960s. Because this vaccine was easier and more effective to deliver, it quickly became the vaccine of choice for many doctors worldwide. Salk and Sabin's vaccines, together with improved sanitation and hygiene, served to drastically lower and global incidence of polio. The World Health Organization WHO initiated a global polio eradication program in 1988, and by the mid-1990s, polio had been eradicated from the majority of the world's countries. Today, many children are immunized against polio as soon as they are eligible. It has resulted in the virus's spread becoming almost non-existent. But once again, this is a luxury that we have now. This disease was a global pandemic 70 years ago, and back then, people were not so fortunate. An iron lung, also known as the tank ventilator or drinker tank, is a device that is used to assist individuals in breathing when their lungs can't. Dr. Philip Drinker and Louis Agassiz Shaw of Harvard University devised the gadget in 1928, and though it was first employed to treat predominantly polio sufferers in the early 20th century, it has since been utilized to treat a range of other medical problems, including Guillain-Barré syndrome, spinal cord injury, and neuromuscular disorders. The iron lung consists of a chamber with two ends, one seat and one open. A vacuum pump is housed in the sealed end and is linked to a series of valves and tubes. The patient is placed inside the chamber with their head outside. The pump's vacuum reduces the ambient pressure inside the chamber, allowing the patient to inhale more deeply. As their lungs fill with air, pressure develops within the chamber, causing them to exhale more quickly. This procedure is repeated until the patient can breathe without the assistance of their own muscles. The iron lung was utilized throughout the 20th century. However, its use was reduced with the introduction of mechanical ventilators in the 1950s. Iron lungs were generally utilized exclusively in situations of severe respiratory failure by the 1960s, and by the 1980s, they had been completely phased out and replaced by contemporary ventilators. Iron lungs are mostly extinct these days. They are nevertheless still employed in extremely rare circumstances, such as when a patient is unable to bear the pressure of a modern ventilator. The iron lung is still a symbol of bravery and tenacity of people who have suffered from respiratory failure in the past. This machine, though devastating in its confinement, has offered many people the opportunity to enjoy a second life, the most famous being.
I feel that my life is a perfect example.
Paul Alexander is one of the most well-known polio survivors.
Hello, my name is Paul Alexander, but they call me the man of the iron lung.
Paul acquired the polio virus when he was 6 years old, and it impacted his life forever. While so many youngsters dying, his case was seen as a miracle because he survived the infection for an incredible 71 years, a world record. And as one might expect, yeah, it was difficult.
It's horrible because it's so contagious, and its the extent of damage.
Paul was unable to move at all. He was confined in that position, in that machine forever. But he was never disheartened by it. He went to college, became a lawyer, and even published a book. It's crazy what humans can sometimes achieve, right? Many people are inspired by Paul's life, and his story reminds us that anything is possible if we are determined and have the right support. The story of Paul is as important as the story of the iron lung, and we must remember both. Are there any other unique medication inventions you want us to talk about? Comment below and let us know. And if you enjoyed the video, please share it. Subscribe to our YouTube channel Behind the Date by clicking the link below. Every other day, we post some wacky, sometimes inspirational, sometimes odd stories. Keep an eye out.